Okay, welcome. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all here. Let's see, we've got a couple people still joining.
Yep, sorry, my little accent light there kind of slipped off.
Oh, no worries. We still have a couple people entering the room, so I'm just gonna let these folks in and then we'll get started here. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Mia. I'm a member of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group. I'm a resident in Ward 3 near Lee Park. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I especially want to thank Pat Backen, our Robbinsdale mayoral candidate, for speaking with us today. The intention of our meeting is to allow for a space to talk about racial justice and equity issues as they pertain to our elected officials ahead of our primary election coming up on August 11th. Several members of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group have come up with a series of questions, and I have presented these questions to Mr. Backen a couple of days ago. We are here to listen and become better informed voters, and for those of us who are white members of the community, we're here to be better allies to our neighbors who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. With that said, we will allow space for follow-up questions from the audience at the end, and white people will defer and listen to BIPOC members when they have something to say. This meeting is recorded, as you should be able to see a recording icon on your screen. You'll notice that audience microphones are off for the first part of our meeting, and then you'll be invited to ask follow-up questions via the chat later on, and I'll open your microphone if you prefer. The meeting structure will be as follows. So in a moment, Mr. Backen will have 5 minutes for an introduction and opening statements. I will spend about 30 minutes asking the questions that we as a group voted on. And then we will take questions from you in the chat for about 15 minutes. And finally, Pat will have 2 minutes for any closing statements where we will wrap up the meeting. Okay, I'm still letting a few more people in here. Okay, excellent. So, Mr. Backen, thank you so much for being here. Will you please introduce yourself and give us your opening statement?
Sure. Well, I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I'm Pat Backen. I've been a member of the Robbinsdale, or a Robbinsdale resident for 22 years. I have a couple of kids that we raised here in Robbinsdale. One went to Cooper and one went to Armstrong. We have a kind of a nice balance here. I've been on the city council almost 10 years. I have been on various different organizations within Robbinsdale. The Lions, I was in the Lions for several years. I've been with the Heart of Robbinsdale Community Foundation. I've done a lot of work with Little League and youth baseball, both in Robbinsdale and throughout the school district. So I've been just around quite a bit. I've sort of done really whatever I can to just kind of make life a little bit better for people in Robbinsdale, whatever I can. You know, I've raised some money for people in need. I've helped maintain the flower baskets downtown with some fundraising, things like that. So I don't know, what else do you want to know, I guess?
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So for the next part of our meeting, we'll be asking you a series of questions that this group has submitted and organized in advance. And for transparency's sake, let's see here. Sorry, I'm muting. If you're not on mute, you can, oh, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So for transparency's sake, these questions were presented to Pat a few days ago. And by the way, any other candidate that has also met with this group and other Zoom calls, these same questions will be asked in the same order. So I'll refrain from asking any follow-up questions at this time. But Pat, if you see any activity in the chat box, which is open to the group, that you want to address in real time, please feel free. For any answers, if this is okay, for any answers that exceed, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes, I'll simply kindly say 15 seconds to ask you to summarize and wrap up so we can get to as many questions as possible today.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's jump in with our first question. What are some of the racial inequities that you identify in Robbinsdale, and what are the metrics you would use to measure our progress in those areas?
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of inequities in Robbinsdale that are sort of built in from throughout society. So those are obviously very difficult for us to tackle all by ourselves, but it absolutely doesn't mean that we can't jump in and kind of help tackle those issues. So one of the things is, I think, Bill Blonigan introduced an ordinance a couple of weeks ago addressing the racial covenants, and certainly it's a great thing to really address. But he mentioned, and I completely agree with it, that's just the start of a conversation. The covenants haven't been enforceable for many, many, many years. And so really this is just a good way to start a conversation about how Robbinsdale was kind of settled and how it became to house the people that live here. Certainly, people were excluded for some time. My house included. I checked, and my house included in 1929 when it was built was part of a racial covenant. Thankfully, when we bought the house, our title people noticed that and took it out. So we don't have that on our title anymore, which I thought was fantastic. So that's one of the ways, and I think that it's a great start to a conversation. Another one is, our staffing is certainly a little bit unbalanced, although we have been making some progress. The last 2 hires have been people of color, women, both of them women, and so that's great. But that's an issue that we have identified. It's been on our yearly goals since I've been on the council for 10 plus years, or almost 10 years. So it's something that we've always been working on, and it's just sometimes very, very difficult to find candidates at the right time that meet some demographic criteria that we would like to see. We have a pretty small staff. I think there's about 75 people that work in Robbinsdale. I think it grows a little bit in the summertime with some part-time workers, and those positions just don't turn over very quickly. So it's sometimes hard to find candidates when you need them, and in oftentimes specialized jobs. But we're continuing to push forward on that. We always have, and I'm sure that we always will. So I don't want to go over my time. So
that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. My next question: what strategies will you use to increase racial equity in Robbinsdale if you're elected?
Yep. Well, so certainly continuing on the hiring process, or doing that. I have a couple of things here. So I have one of the things. My daughter dated a young man in high school, and he belonged to the Police Explorers program in Brooklyn Center. And I think that's a really great way of, really targeting young people and bridging the gap between the police and young people, especially people that are interested in pursuing policing as a career. My daughter joined him several times, and they have really fun events when they have their meetings, and then they get to go out and actually do real life work. So that's one of the things I've asked the police to look into. It would likely be a combination with Crystal and New Hope, a joint venture, working with the schools. Certainly it would be open to everyone, but my focus would be to ask that they look for people of color, kids of color, and for 2 reasons. Number one, I think that that's the best way to really bridge those gaps in a really positive way. And second, it's very, very, very difficult for us to find police candidates at all. And so this is a really great way of introducing them and having some experience and understanding, having them understand the job, and having the police departments understand them. So that's one way. Another way I really want to do is I want to have cookouts at all of the apartment buildings in conjunction with the police. So apartment buildings are very, very difficult sometimes because there's a lot of what's the best word to use? There's a lot of people that move in and out at times. And so you don't have that kind of those roots, so to speak. And so it's sometimes hard to really reach out to them and have really strong connections. So one of the things I want to do is just have very low-key cookouts where there's free food and the police are there and there's members of the public there, where we can just interact with people and just in a really casual and fun environment. So that's a couple of ways. And oftentimes we have found that the majority of BIPOC people in Robbinsdale, certainly not all of them, but a large portion do live in apartment buildings. And so I think that that's an important way to reach out to them. So sort of
Okay.
go where they are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. My next question, have you done any personal work or learning on topics of racism? And if so, what nature?
Yeah, I will be honest, I haven't done a lot. I have met with several BIPOC members of my community here in my neighborhood and others in Robbinsdale. My neighbor is just a really fantastic resource for me we just sort of kick around, some of the concerns that he has and what we can do about them. We do have some trainings scheduled both at my full-time job and through the city, hopefully. I thought it was already scheduled, but Marcia said that it wasn't quite scheduled yet. So, but hopefully we'll get some trainings. And I have started reading, I'm about halfway through The End of Policing to get a better sense of kind of that idea of really transforming the police departments, into to better serve our community. So those are really the ways. There's obviously lots more work to do, and the other thing is, I'm an avid reader, and so I read lots and lots and lots of articles, and so wherever I can sort of pick those things up, and so.
Right. You just mentioned policing a moment ago, so my next question segues nicely. How would you hold the Robbinsdale Police Department accountable if there were inappropriate or harmful actions?
Yep, so I think probably most of you know that the city manager is directly responsible for the police. And so it would really be working with her and the police chief, especially as mayor, I would have a little bit more access than I do as a council member. We're all essentially equals, but the mayor does have a little bit more access, I think. So really working with the city manager and the police department or the police chief, and also really calling for outside investigators if it's something that is, really egregious, or if it's, not going the way I sort of feel it should, but really just kind of holding them accountable by making sure that each issue is addressed as it comes up. So that's the main way. There was another, I do think there are some, I have witnessed and I have heard of, some kind of overly aggressive interactions. They haven't been physical. I've never seen something physical in nature, but it just sort of seems like it's an overreaction sometimes when the police approach people. Interesting, it's been, mostly people of color, but certainly some white people have said this as well. And so I think that there's some, and I've already talked to both the captain and the chief about this, about how we can, how you can still maintain control of the situation, which is always their concern, but doing it in a really professional way and in a really in a way that is a little more respectful, I think, sometimes. So, and like I said, I've already talked to the chief and the captain about that, and so hopefully we can have a further conversation about that. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question: what policy changes have you contributed to in support of racial justice and equity?
Well, we had a request by the Human Rights Commission a few years ago for a resolution or a statement stating that Robbinsdale is a welcoming community, which I absolutely supported. It was focused primarily on the Hispanic community because it was right around the time that all of the immigration issues were coming up a few years ago after President Trump was elected. And so that was fantastic, and I was absolutely in favor of that. But I also wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anyone out. And so I really asked that we include, Black members of the community, brown members of the community, LGBT members of the community, really just include everyone rather than just focusing on one slice of the population. So that's one thing. And then, so I also have asked that I've asked the finance director and the city manager to investigate ways that we can take some of the city funds. We have many reserve funds that often don't really go anywhere. They just sort of sit there and are invested. So having some of those funds invested in places that really support BIPOC businesses and issues, I guess. And then also I asked that they look at putting some money in Sunrise Banks here in town. They're a huge leader in kind of social social responsibility banking. And so by putting some of our funds there, it will just provide them more availability of funds to put to good use in their social responsibility banking and loans in places that really are underserved. So I'm hoping that we can do some of that. I think that that's, you know, a pretty easy way for us. It's like a pretty low bar for us to be able to do that, but I think it could have a really nice effect. So.
Great, thank you. I actually did not know that about Sunrise Bank, so it's nice to learn that. Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My next question, what would be your first action as mayor to ensure Robbinsdale is starting down the path of working towards racial equity among our residents, businesses, and schools?
So the first thing is to really work with the Human Rights Commission and to really help them meet their goals. So they stated, I'm going to read these off since I'm never going to remember them exactly. But in 2018, they came up with a group of stated goals. One is promote awareness and understanding of human rights issues across our community, increase access to visibility to the commission, strengthen the commission's relationship with the city administrator, increase the commission's capacity to promote awareness and understanding of human rights issues. I think I missed one because it was both with the city administration and the city leadership. So, so it strengthened that relationship. So, you know, I think we've started down that path already. I think the hiring of Lisa Lofgren-Jones is a huge help to both the city staff and the Human Rights Commission to kind of help set up a plan for moving forward and really being impactful. So, so that's one way. I think I lost one. Oh, the other thing. I'm sorry. One more quick point. One other ways. I really would like to see them meet more regularly with the police department. They have met with them. They help craft our body camera policy. They've met with them several times about other policies, but I would like to see that just be an ongoing conversation. You know, at least a couple of times a year, if not more. So just to go, you know, get a better sense of each other and see if there's issues that are being missed that haven't been discussed. So.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry to interrupt before. I was just going to say, okay. Lisa, you mentioned, has been fantastic. I think many people in this group have seen a little bit of the work that she's been doing in some of their webcasts. So my next question also relates to the Human Rights Commission. So perhaps you can elaborate more, or maybe you answered this already, but how would you use the Robbinsdale Human Rights Commission as a resource?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of this answer was sort of in the last one, but I think that you know, certainly strengthening that group with some training and helping them really meet together. Like in the past, they've had a hard time maintaining quorums and having enough members show up for meetings, which I think is frustrating for the people that are there and that show and want to do the work, show up and want to do the work, and they can't have a meeting. You know, there's very specific rules around city meetings, both about having them being open to the public and having the right number of people there and things of that nature. So, so really working to make sure that the people there are really engaged and are available to be there. Sometimes it's just a matter of scheduling, and so we can work with them that way. And again, I think a lot of the ways. One of the issues down a little bit lower is, like, I'm hopeful to continue a consultancy with Lisa or someone else, and so I think that would also help to really kind of strengthen that group and also make them more effective. So
great, thank you. Next question comes back to the RPD once more. This is a bit of a broader question, but what changes do you envision for the Robbinsdale Police Department?
So I see really enhancing what they're doing with adding some additional staff. As far as, you know, I suggested before our yearly meeting, I asked the chief, I called him and asked him if what he thought about adding a social worker, and I was going to bring that up at our yearly meeting. And he said, well, we're already started. And so that was nice. So we're already starting down that path a little bit. That's a part-time position that would really be like a follow-up position to, so should there be some kind of an issue, say a mental health issue, you know, I will use, my family is okay with this, so I will use this example. My son actually a few years ago, well, many years ago now, overdosed. And so we had the police come in and the ambulances come in and the whole thing, and they did a fantastic job. And so in a case like that, you know, we obviously went to the hospital and you know, and we had those resources. But a social worker then would follow up with our family, and you know, at that time he was under 18, I believe, and well, for sure under 18, but under 16. And so he would follow up to make sure that we have the resources. He or she would follow up to make sure we had the resources that we need, and kind of try and just marshal resources so that these issues don't happen again, and that people can really get better. So that's fantastic. We're also working with Crystal and New Hope, and it's a county position. It would be funded by the county, and likely someone that has experience with the county so that they are aware of all the resources that they have. And so really enhancing our staff that way, with people like that. Let's see, what else did I have on here?
My next question actually kind of ties into this. If you don't mind, I'd
No, go
be
right
happy
ahead.
to ask the next one. Okay, so do you have any contacts or community partnerships in Robbinsdale or in other local communities that you would use as resources to advance racial equity?
To be honest, I personally do not. I know that the city staff does, and so I rely on the city staff to really kind of drive those when we, you know, rather than have a bunch of separate people making suggestions and moving staff around, we always funnel things through the city manager, who sort of is the president of the city, so to speak. And so we really defer to her on finding those. We make requests that she do so. I mean, I think Lissa is a good example. So I think that to continue to do that and even expand on that is one of the goals that I would like to see. Again, if it's not Lissa, it could be another consultant or someone. And so we're coming up on budgeting this, you know, in the next few months. It'll be very interesting to see that, you know, no one really knows what's going to happen with finances, but regardless, I think we can carve out some money to make sure that we have, you know, someone, even if it's on a part-time basis to start with, to really help and partner with some other community organizations that do this and really have a ton of experience where we really don't, you know, to be blunt and honest.
Great, thank you. I just want to mention to anyone who's joined us partway through, we are in the part of our meeting where we are asking the prepared questions from this group, and we've got about 5 more questions left, and then after that point we'll be opening it up to the group. You can certainly start asking some follow-up questions by typing them into the chat, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So my next question, Mr. Backen, what is your #1 priority or goal as mayor?
Yeah, so I have kind of 3 that I'm working with, but the one that's really that's really focused on what this group is, what's important to this group, is really creating a vibrant and connected community. Robbinsdale is a really strong community in many ways and has a tremendous amount of pride. You know, and certainly not everyone feels that way, and not everyone feels as connected. And so finding ways to really reach out and connect even further, and really make sure that people feel, everyone has that pride in living in Robbinsdale. You know, I think that's going to be a goal to reach. I don't know if it's, you know, not every single person will, you know, always be very prideful of living in Robbinsdale, but it's something to aspire to. And I think some of the ways is really, like I said, with, you know, reaching out to the apartment buildings that are sometimes overlooked, quite frankly, and really getting, you know, interacting with them in a much better way. So it's really strengthening all of those community ties, whether it's, you know, residents and businesses to businesses and residents and neighborhoods to each other, things like that. You know, that's always been important to me. Always, you know, I have a lot of posts on my webpage, and part of that was an interest in doing just that, but also providing information for people. Oftentimes there's rumors floating around, and really it's like, well, let's just get facts out, and here are the facts, and or at least the facts as I see them, I guess, right? But I try to be very, very balanced on those things, and so I think that's a way to also to sort of all of a sudden have people having the same conversation rather than separate conversations with people. So that's another way of connecting the community. I think it's not a huge game changer, I don't think, but I do think it helps. So
great, thank you. Okay, when should the City of Robbinsdale take the lead on social issues, and when should the city wait for action at the state or federal levels?
Yeah, so this is a really hard question. I really see the role of city government as sort of just dealing with the nuts and bolts of our community and making sure that our rules and ordinances are really evenly enforced and justly enforced. There are certainly ways that we can do increasing social. How do I want to say this? Like bringing additional information about social issues and social justice, and really working with our state legislatures, I think is a really important way for us to express how we feel. I've worked with Mike Freiberg on a number of issues about how what I feel Robbinsdale's, certainly my perspective of what I think should be happening as it affects Robbinsdale. And some of these things are really hard. I'll try and do this really quickly. But I was friends with Blong Yang, or still I'm friends with Blong Yang, who was the city council member just across the Parkway. And he was against the $15 minimum wage because he was very, very concerned that it would draw so many new people for these jobs that the people in the neighborhoods would be sort of shut out. And so we'll have people coming in from other communities that may have easier transportation or better transportation. And so an issue like that is, in my opinion, is really better to do in a statewide, at least countywide, but hopefully statewide way, to really even the playing field across all of the cities and all of the states. So.
Great, thank you. Next question, what is your vision for ensuring all Robbinsdale residents feel safe and free of harmful prejudices?
So I think a lot of this is really getting out and talking to people and really listening to their experiences and how they feel, and then really acting on those. If they have a problem with feeling prejudice from or bias from the police, like get to the bottom of that and really see if we can have a conversation with both of them in the room, or if they're not comfortable, figuring out a way to really get them talking or get them to understand each other in a little bit better way. I think those are going to be, there's going to be some very, very hard conversations. I think people certainly have their own point of views about things, and sometimes those are hard to move. Sometimes people get stuck in their ways or in their opinions, and so there'll be some hard conversations, I think, but I really think that it's really just engaging people in a more, almost not really, I don't want to say formal way, but in a more progressive way, or in a more, boy, it's Friday afternoon, can you tell? But really proactive way is what I was trying to say.
Sure.
And I think some of the community organizations, I've worked with the Blue Line Coalition for a long time, and they had some really great outreach programs that reached people that were typically underserved. And so I know that there are organizations out there that we can use and leverage their experiences and help to help us get some of those conversations started.
Okay, thank you. My second to last question of our prepared questions. If elected, will you find it important to allocate city funds toward racial equity programs?
Yes, absolutely. And as I mentioned, it's could be very, very tricky in the next few years, but I do think it's important that we do this. It at minimum at a part-time way, or with a consultant. I just think that it's with the killing of George Floyd, and it is like we all know, it was it was just stunningly stunning and just horrific. And I think we all really want to really have this be a catalyst for change. And I think that to do it right now, when everything is fresh and there's a lot of interest, I think, and especially in Minnesota and Minneapolis, I think it's important that we keep up that kind of boy. And I am really running out of gas.
Really, I think I know what you're going for. Go
yeah,
with the momentum, the energy.
So I think it's really crucial that we do that, and so I think it's very important, and I'm sure that we'll find some funding to do that in the next budget.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, one more question here. Do you feel that the city parks and recreation serve all residents living in Robbinsdale?
I will be honest, I do not have a good handle on this. I don't know. I am very plugged in, so I know where to find information. I know how to find information. And so I really don't know. I do know that we really want to improve our communication from the recreation department to reach all throughout the city. And so I'm sure that I think that there's a way to look at these issues or look at the services that we offer and make sure that we are covering, kind of all types of programming and all kinds, and really do a much better job of reaching out to everyone throughout the community. And again, I sort of point back to some of the apartment buildings that we might be able to focus and do some more focused and targeted information. So.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, so we've now covered the questions that this group has prepared for you. And we have some time for those here in this meeting to ask you any follow-up questions from what you've heard so far. So for those listening, you can type your question in the chat. I don't know if we'll do waving at the camera. There should be a raise your hand type of button that might be easier for me to manage. And then if you like, I can certainly open your microphone too. So we've dedicated about 15 minutes of time for this space. And if we do run out of time, I'll ask you to hold your remaining questions, and then Mr. Backen can tell us in his closing statements the best way to reach out and continue these conversations outside of our meeting today.
So
okay.
There are a few questions in the chat. Should we deal with those first?
Yes, I would like to. So starting with Lindsay's question, this was early on in the meeting, and I believe Lindsay is referring to, Lindsay asks, where do you look for candidates? I believe this is in reference to finding new police officers.
Mm-hmm. Actually, can I clarify?
Please do.
Quick? Yeah, this was actually when Mr. Backen was talking about wanting to diversify just the staff that work for the city. And he said that had been a goal for, about 10 years, which is a really long time. So I was just curious as to where the city typically looks for candidates and why we weren't able to find a more diverse pool.
Yeah, so there are a few places that everyone that is in city government and state government, mostly city government for most of these, know if they're looking to find a job or get a new job or a promotion or move up. There's a League of Minnesota Cities organization that most of the cities in the state contribute to, and they have a job posting list. So that's kind of the place that everyone that's involved in city government knows to go to find jobs. And so oftentimes we go there simply because that's where everyone that's involved in city government city employees know to look and to post their resumes. When we hire, it is, like I said, we only have about 75 people, and those jobs just don't turn over very quickly. And many times they're very specialized. We'll need another city engineer, or we'll need, our most recent hire was the director of human resources. And so they're very specified. And so we really, and typically this last one came up very quickly. The person that was in charge of human resources moved pretty quickly. She got married and they decided to move. So it went very quickly. So it was really a matter of timing and who was available. And in this particular case, we did hire a woman of a BIPOC woman for that position. And so we're sometimes limited to who we can find. And city government is a lot different than, you know, you don't go to monster.com necessarily to look for an accountant, because there are very specified rules and things for city finances. And so I think accountant, there's probably a little more wiggle room, but certainly human resources, or, you know, for the police, it's very specified to, like, you have to know the Minnesota laws and rules. And so posting outside of the state, for instance, for an opening has pretty limited results, simply because first you have to find somebody that's wanting to move, and then second, you have to make sure that they have the right kind of experience, the right kind of knowledge, and you know, that they know Minnesota laws. And so that's the primary reason, or the primary place. Now, when we hire for some of the, like, the summer staff, that often goes out on Facebook. There's some word of mouth. I think there's a group of high school students that probably talk amongst themselves, and a lot of them are there for a couple of years. We did not hire very many of those this year, given the situation and the circumstances. But I think that we could probably do a better job of advertising those particular jobs in more places, and I'm sure that we'll do that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Lindsay, for that question. Thanks also for clarifying. I know that was early on in the meeting. I do want to share Patty Miller's feedback. Patty says, I would like to see a female person of color chief of police hired. I would like to address Nicholas's question next. Have there been any decisions made by council during your tenure that you now identify as having a potentially negative impact on BIPOC community members, directly or indirectly?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's not a question that I really thought about. You know, there's not one that I could absolutely be missing something, so bear with me, but there's nothing that really jumps out at me. We work really hard to make sure that all of the rules and the ordinances and things that we do are really fair to everyone, and they're evenly handled. So I don't think there really is. And now I'm sure someone is going to, like, point one out. So feel free, and I can answer that too. There certainly could have been.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I do want to mention Patty's other comment here. The community center should have a sliding fee scale for low-income families. That's some more feedback from Patty. Jennifer asks, follow up on the Parks and Recreation question. Were you for or against replacing the basketball hoop at Manor Park?
So I was there, and just sort of, I was at the meeting where that happened, and I was really there to listen, and I sort of went with the group that the residents that wanted it removed, because that was the majority of residents. There were some in the past that it had been removed one other time, when there were some very difficult situations, including violence and some injuries with assaults with knives and things like that. And I think that the neighborhood was very concerned that was happening again. It was very loud, and there was a lot of swearing, and so I was in favor, simply because of the fact that the majority of residents were. One of the other people there that spoke for it, I actually, Damian Washington, we continue to talk on a somewhat regular basis to ensure that we have some good policies in place, and make sure that we're making some good choices there. So.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a note in the chat. I see some double questions from the same people. I would like to circle back to those, but first, getting questions from a variety of people as best as we can with the time that we have. So I'd like to ask Laura's question. Laura says, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, a volunteer Robbinsdale firefighter was reported for making racist remarks on social media. No known response was given for this behavior, and there was no suspension. How would you, as mayor, have handled the situation, and why wasn't more done?
So I did know about this. I don't think many people did know about it. Laura, I think you know that I know about it. I think, first of all, I don't know what happened. I mean, I saw the post and I saw it was taken down. I don't know how the matter was handled. If it was handled, I know that there was some conversations. I don't know how, but I don't know how those conversations went. It's very hard because it's a personnel matter, and so that there are there are data privacy laws that are incorporated. My guess is, and I don't know this, but I'm guessing that the mayor was involved, and I'm sure that the city manager was involved, and so I do know that the mayor was involved because I know someone sent him that thing, but it's a privacy issue, and so we can't talk about it. I may have handled it exactly as he did. I don't know what the results are, simply because it's an internal matter and it's a personnel matter that we just don't have access to because of data privacy laws. So,
could you possibly elaborate a little bit more on what you would do, whether or not it's the same?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I would make sure that the issue was addressed, and I would absolutely make sure that the issue is addressed, and work with, again, the police chief, who is this person, in this case, a firefighter, his direct report, and work with the city manager, and just ensure that there's a social media policy that is relatively new, and so make sure that that is being enforced, and that everyone has signed off on those things, and just make sure that those things are being addressed and handled without, I guess, making sure that there aren't really politics involved in the handling, that friends aren't letting friends off, kind of a situation. So
right. Okay, thank you. I'd like to move next to Jackie's question. Jackie asks, would you support a paid position to lead a racial equity task force similar to Golden Valley?
I would, so this is, again, it's a funding question, and it's very difficult. The Golden Valley budget is, about 2 or 3 times our budget, and they have a much larger tax base. Our tax base has, it's simply they have 3 Fortune 500 companies, and in our city, we have our largest employer is a nonprofit who pays a very limited amount of property tax. So the tax capacity of Robbinsdale is much smaller than the tax capacity of Golden Valley. So they are able to spread their taxes much further, and they don't fall on individuals and residents. And so, the question is, can we make it work? And I think we can make it work. But again, I think at least to start, it would have to be a part-time position.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, there's a new question from Susan. If an employee was fired for abusing the social media policy, why would the firefighter not be? Is it because he is friends with the mayor?
I don't know why. Like I said, I don't have any insight into that, simply because it's a personnel matter. So I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back up to Nicholas's second question. Do you think the community needs more police in the spirit of change when talking about finding new ways to support the community?
So I'm going to say something that's probably controversial to this group. And right now, we have open police positions, and I think that we do need to fill those positions, simply because our staff, our police staff, is really running ragged in some cases. There's a lot of overtime, and until we can get the structures and the support that we need for adding social workers, for instance, it's really there has to be some work done to get that structure in place. We need to be, the county is going to be a key player here. They have the social safety net. They have all of the resources that we don't have in Robbinsdale to really help people get through these things. And so from everything from, the 911 call facilities all through the county, so that would have to change a little bit. And so In the short term, I do think we need a couple more police officers simply to help our staff, because if someone gets hurt, we have people that, I think was playing softball and wrecked a knee and couldn't work for a while. And so people, just like everyone else, people are hurt and can't do their jobs. And so you have to cover all of those things. So for the short term, yes, I do think we need a couple more police officers. I don't know if we need to continue to add once we get up to our the number that the police think is necessary. And then we just need to work on additional resources that can really impact the community in a different way.
Okay, thank you. I want to circle back to Jennifer's other question. Jennifer asks, what is your definition of affordable housing? Are you for or against including an affordable housing requirement when redevelopment opportunities arise?
Well, there's a huge range of affordable housing, right? I mean, there's affordable housing for, I think that the highest level is for people that make 80% of the median income, of the area median income, which is about $75,000, a little $75,500, I think, for a family of four. And so in Robbinsdale, there's 82% of our housing is considered affordable by that metric. And then as we go down, obviously there's not as many, but the lowest level, which I believe is up to 30%, which is $30,000 for a family of four, which is, scary, right? But we have 10% of the housing units available in Robbinsdale are affordable for that level of affordable housing. And so, there's this wide gamut, and 10%, by the way, is greater than any of the other surrounding communities that we have here. Golden Valley's somewhat close at that level, but as they go up, they get further and further away. And so Crystal and Robbinsdale have about the same for that 80% number, at about 82 or 81%. So there's really a spectrum of affordable housing. And so, and moving forward, do I like new development? I think that we really have to look at each project individually and to make sure. We've done a lot of work with for transit related development, and many of our users are back in my old job. Many of our council members have gone to conventions about light rail transit. And one of the things that people say is when you have mixed development or mixed housing like this, like they have found that the best way to do the best support for the people that need affordable housing is to put them together and not mix them necessarily with other people. So it's a better way to support them. I don't know how true that is. I'm not a housing expert whatsoever. But one thing I do think is I think we have to be very, very careful. I think Minneapolis has made a mistake. I talked to Mayor Hodges' husband, Gary Cunningham, who was our Met Council representative, and about concentrating housing in one place. It doesn't do it doesn't do anyone good. It doesn't help necessarily. You need kind of to have that affordable housing split throughout the entire community, so that there are. If you look at North Minneapolis, they have a hard time keeping a grocery store, and I think some of that is you have a concentration of poverty there, and they have a lot of people that may not be able to use that service. So, again, I'm not an expert by any chance, but I think that it's something that we have to look at carefully.
Okay, thank
you.
Can
I ask a clarifying question quickly?
Jennifer, yes, go ahead.
So that 10% that's affordable to the 30% AMI that you're talking about, do you know what size those units are? I mean, are those all studio apartments, or are those actually family-sized units that a poor family can actually live in?
I do not know, to be perfectly honest. I don't know.
Okay, because I think that's a problem when we just use statistics when we are making decisions about housing.
Could be.
We really need to take into consideration the fact that families need affordable housing, not just single people who can live in a studio apartment.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely. I don't have statistics on what that what those units are. I do know that Clare Housing. I worked very closely with Clare Housing to get them into Robbinsdale, and they are typally single units for single people, and it's supportive housing for people living with HIV and AIDS. And excuse me. So I know that those are certainly part of that group of units, and they are essentially small units because they're designed that way for single people to so they can support them coming out of homelessness. So, but the other ones I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Now I admit I've been keeping an eye on the chat here. We have a few more questions, but I also want to open it up. I see I've gone into the view where I can see you all now. Yes, Marcus, right? Can I unmute you?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, Pat. I think I met you on my block the other day. I think you were passing out leaflets. I wanted to circle back on a question that the group had asked in terms of the parks and recs and understanding whether that they're served for all communities. Your answer, I believe, was that you weren't sure, you didn't know, and all those things. You've been a Robbinsdale resident for 22 years, and you've been on the city council as well. How can we ensure, or how are you going to ensure us that you're going to be dialed in to know these answers so that we are entrusting our vote for you?
Yeah, sure. So that's a very, very good question. So we, as a city council and as the mayor, are essentially the board of directors, and we sort of set policy at the highest levels. And so the people that get those, I mean, I absolutely agree that that's something I should know. There's no question about it. So I'm not trying to make an excuse here at all. So, but typically how those things go is that the staff gets those are the people that implement the policies and the projects. And so I think that's someplace where the city in general has probably lacked and was a little bit behind. And I think we all need to do a better job at understanding what the needs are in the community. So,
but how will you ensure that you're going to follow up on that and be dialed in?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, since we're starting, the task force, that will be one of the tasks of the task force. When that rolls out, we'll work with the Human Rights Commission to ensure that that they are dialed in as well, and they can kind of help guide us. I'm going to be, look at, I'm a middle-aged white guy, right? So I'm not gonna know those answers myself necessarily. But you're right, I do need to do more, and so we'll just ask some better questions of staff, and we'll make sure that they're looking at those issues as well.
If I may suggest to do some personal learning, some reading on something outside of a person of non-color book. Try something that is written by an author of color to get some understanding of where people may be coming from.
Perspective, that's all.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. All right. I would like to ask Todd's question from the chat next. This looks like a follow-up from earlier. So hiring a social worker or equity position might offset the need for police. Is there discussion of hiring of other professionals more well-suited to address issues police respond to instead of fulfilling the police quota?
So that's a good question, but I'm going to sort of fall back to my answer. I'm not sure that the support and the framework for those positions are available just yet. I think that we could hire a social worker, but how are we going to know that the social worker needs to go out instead of a police officer? That structure isn't in place yet. So we need to work with the county to ensure that they're asking the correct questions and they know what the issues are. Oftentimes, when people call 911 especially in a mental health capacity, it would be it's at the very last moment, where there's physical danger, and so not always, of course, at all, as I mentioned, with my son, but there are times that, and then that was a medical emergency, so certainly that we would need an ambulance for sure. And the police are handled for some medical emergencies as well. But I think that we need to, like, we as a community and as the metro area need to get the framework for some of those things in place before we just add a social worker and hope things work out. I think we need to have a plan, and I think those plans are starting to be talked about and to be put in place. I know that the art department, the captain, has mentioned that they're just starting those conversations. So we're getting there, I think.
Okay.
We're there.
Thank you. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll start with wrapping up the meeting and closing statements, okay? I'd like to ask Kirsten's question from the chat. Do you stand by how the city council and mayor reacted after George Floyd died? If you were mayor, how would you have handled it? The same or different?
Yeah, I think I would have handled it differently. I think that, you know, it's something that we could have and probably should have addressed much, much quicker. It sort of happened at an odd time for the council, which is, again, not an excuse or not trying to make an excuse. But I think that we absolutely should have handled that much better. I think just to acknowledge the kind of the horrific nature of it and really reach out to everyone in the community to just say we stand with everyone and think this is just absolutely horrific. I think that we would have absolutely, and we should have absolutely addressed it a little bit faster without question, and I would do so.
Okay, thank you. So we have spent a little bit more than 15 minutes, so thank you for answering many of our follow-up questions. I know there are more that we didn't get to. However, we do need to bring our meeting to a close now. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Backen, for a brief closing statement. And also, could you tell us the best way to find you online and the best way to ask any follow-up questions that haven't been answered and to continue these conversations outside of our meeting?
Sure. So all of my contact information is on my website. Right now it's Backen for Mayor, FOR, backenformayor.com. The best way is either through that contact form or emailing me. My personal email address is on that site. You can call or text. I will tell you, that's my cell phone number. Texting is a much better way of getting a hold of me, especially during the day when I'm working. But you can call as well, and I'm happy to. We can talk like this, you know, with a Zoom meeting or via phone or via email or in person, as long as we, you know, maintain some distance. And I'm happy to talk or meet with anybody.
Great. And I don't want to jump over you. If you do have any closing statements that you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, just, you know, thanks for having me. I think, you know, I think we agree on many, many, many things, and I'm sure that there's, you know, differences in implementation and timing and things like that, undoubtedly. But I really just, you know, I want to thank you guys for the work that you've been doing, and you know, just to let you know, I'm listening, and we're listening, and we're all learning, and I absolutely pledge to continue to do that. I certainly don't have all the answers, or, you know, maybe not even many of the answers, but I'm certainly willing to learn for sure. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. And again, thank you, Mr. Backen, for your time with us today. Everyone, just a reminder, please be sure you're registered to vote. Vote early by mail. Be sure your ballot is postmarked by August 11th. And if you vote in person on the 11th, please wear your mask and practice social distancing. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks again.
See you, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.